Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu landed in Washington, D.C. for his week-long visit that will include an address to the U.S. Congress. But before we dive into that, an update on day 291 of the war in Gaza. A renewed IDF ground incursion has been launched in Gaza's Khan Younis. The IDF operation came after intelligence that Hamas was attempting to re-establish its presence in the city. And this as Israel's Knesset voted last night to approve the first reading of a bill designating UNRWA, the Palestinian aid agency, as a terrorist organization and severing all ties with it. UNRWA workers participated in the October 7th terrorist attack, and UNRWA facilities have been consistently used in Gaza by Hamas to carry out terrorist activities. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz reports.
IDF troops from the 98th Division began a combined operation above and below ground in Khan Younis. The operation followed intelligence that located and led to the elimination of armed terrorists and terror infrastructure in the area, indicating that Hamas is attempting to restore terror operations in the city. The Air Force and artillery hit more than 30 terror targets in Khan Younis, including the area from which a launch was made that fell in an open area near Nirim. In order to avoid civilian casualties, Gazans were ordered to leave parts of the humanitarian areas in Khan Younis after intelligence indicated that Hamas had embedded terror infrastructure inside the humanitarian zone. The humanitarian area has now been adjusted, and some Gazan civilians were instructed to move to other areas. In Rafah, IDF troops operated in a school near a humanitarian route that armed terrorists tried to take over. The troops directed drones that located and eliminated the armed terrorists on the route. Meanwhile, in heartbreaking news, the IDF informed the families of the two hostages, Alex Danzig, 76, and Yagev Buchstab, 35, are no longer alive. Alex and Yagev were brutally abducted into Gaza, and their bodies are still being held by Hamas. The confirmation of their deaths comes after intelligence indicated that they died in captivity. The circumstances of their deaths have not been determined. More than half of the 120 hostages held in Gaza since October 7th are not believed to have survived the 291 days in Hamas captivity.
And Prime Minister Netanyahu is in Washington ahead of expected meetings with President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and former President Donald Trump. Current political turmoil in D.C. resulted in uncertainty in the Prime Minister's schedule, but upon arrival, he went straight into a meeting with families of Israeli hostages and told them conditions for a deal are coming together. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz reports.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has arrived in the U.S., but his schedule remains uncertain. Today's planned meeting with President Biden is not expected to take place until later in the week due to the president still recovering from COVID. Biden is at his home in Delaware and is not expected back in Washington until he tests negative. Upon arrival in Washington, Netanyahu met with a group of families of Israeli hostages and told them that the conditions for a deal are coming together without a doubt.
אנחנו נחושים להחזיר את כולם. התנאים להחזיר אותם מבשילים מן הטעם הפשוט שאנחנו מפעילים לחץ מאוד מאוד חזק על חמאס, ואנחנו רואים שינוי מסוים, ואני חושב שהשינוי הזה ילך ויגדל.
It's not yet clear if Netanyahu will meet former president and Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump. Netanyahu requested the meeting, but according to Axios, the former president has yet to agree, but has not ruled it out. According to that report, the meeting would not take place until after his Thursday night rally in North Carolina. In that case, Netanyahu would remain in the U.S. longer than intended and would only return home after the Sabbath on Saturday night. A meeting with Vice President and likely Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris is possible, but also not yet scheduled. Harris is busy lining up support for her presidential run after President Biden announced he will not stand for re-election. Netanyahu is scheduled to address both houses of Congress tomorrow.
And let's remember there are 120 hostages still being held by Hamas in Gaza. 5 of them are Americans. Do you know their names? Keith Siegel, Hirsch Goldberg Polin, Sagi Dekel-Chen, Omer Neutra, and Idan Alexander, all being held for 291 days. Hopefully, we'll bring them all home soon. And joining me now in the studio with more on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to Washington, D.C., Our Gidon Israel, founder and president of the Jerusalem Washington Center, and veteran Israeli journalist and author Bendel Yemini. Thank you both for joining us today. So, Gidon, let's start with you. You know, the Prime Minister is set to address Congress, have his long-awaited meeting with President Biden. What's the main purpose of this visit, and why now?
Well, I think the main purpose of the visit is probably, I'd say the Prime Minister has three goals. I think the first is to convey to the American people why they should be supporting Israel in this war with Gaza, potentially with Lebanon, and even with Iran. I think he wants to invigorate Israel supporters to put pressure on their representatives, especially in the Democratic Party, so that the Democratic Party will be more supportive of Israel as much as possible. And I think also there, he would like to speak to enough pro-Israel Democratic Party representatives who will hopefully, by maybe being more outspoken about Israel, it'll cause those who are sitting on the fence, which is about half of the Democratic Party, to vote more to support Israel. And finally, I think by speaking to the American people, hopefully he'll invigorate supporters on the Republican side to go out and vote for Trump, even though, of course, he won't say anything he won't say anything that says go vote for Trump, but by saying that we need the support and it's important to support us, the message will be understood.
Mm-hmm. And Bendel, do you agree with that assessment? I mean, what message do you think Netanyahu is bringing with him to Washington?
I don't know, because I just remember that last time it was not the best way in order to convince the American public opinion, in order to not let this agreement with the Iranians go on. It did not work. I hope this time it's going to work more. Let's not forget, we began this war with, I would say, the unprecedented support to Israel. And now we are, after more than almost 10 months, we are speaking about the worst situations that Israel ever faced. Something happened. Something happened. And we cannot exempt Netanyahu from what happened. He is the Prime Minister. So he made a lot of mistakes. I do hope that he will correct something, because without any political debate that we might have about Netanyahu, we want the best for Israel. That's what we want. So we do hope that he will, as my friend said, that he will succeed in convincing more people in the case of Israel and in supporting Israel. I do hope that it will happen.
I would add that also the America and even the Congress that Netanyahu is speaking to now, as opposed to last time he was there in 2015 and he spoke, is very different. First of all, the Democratic Party has moved much farther to the left. Remember, even one of Israel's supposedly best friends in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, called for the resignation of Netanyahu, and he put him in the same basket as Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. That's the first thing. So there's much less support on the Democratic Party side for Israel now. And also, second, on the Republican side, we're seeing cracks in the traditional and almost wall-to-wall support for Israel. Some are asking, especially on the more libertarian side, wait a second, why are we sending money to Israel? Like, we have problems on our border, our economy is not doing so well, we have runaway inflation. So it's also important to speak to that constituency, why it's into America's advantage to support Israel. So that's a difference between 9 years from the last speech to this speech now.
Yeah, it didn't work until now. We do hope that something will change. But we have to admit that it did not work until now. And what we see is less support in Israel. It's not only the universities. I mean, many times we tell ourselves, we delude ourselves that maybe it's only the universities, maybe it's only students. No, it's not. It's not. It's much worse. Yes, you were completely right by saying that something happened in the Democratic Party. Yes. But we have to think about our mistake, about the Israeli government mistakes, by not convincing the American public opinion, and mainly the Democrats, that they are wrong. And they are wrong. needless to say. They are completely wrong. They many times do not understand the realities in the Middle East.
Well,
and we have a problem.
I want to ask you, because, Netanyahu waited a very long time for this meeting with President Biden, who is now on his way out. I mean, not quite the meeting that he had hoped for, perhaps. I mean, how do you think that the meeting between Bibi and Biden will play out? I mean, it's no secret they've had their differences, as you've both mentioned, about the changes within the Democratic Party. Biden is not concerned with your election now. Could this be maybe a risky move, a detrimental move for Netanyahu?
Biden is still the president of the United States. And I think that this only happened now because, or in this area of time, because we're after a period of a few months where America has withheld munitions from Israel that Israel said it's needed. And as a reservist in Gaza, I can tell you we feel that. So I think Netanyahu waited and I guess did all that he could before he came to Congress or before they arranged the speaking engagement.
So Benjol, Netanyahu is also supposed to meet with Kamala Harris, whose track record on Israel is controversial. She's made a number of anti-Israel statements that have resurfaced recently. I mean, how do you think that a meeting like that would play out, and what would Netanyahu hope to gain out of that?
It's very interesting because actually when we are speaking about the White House, she was in charge on the connection with the Muslims, with the Muslim communities. I mean, it was not something which was official, but that was her job. So I want to assume that maybe the anti-Israeli declaration were because of her special job, unofficial job. But yes, we have a problem. We have a problem because she doesn't have this kind of deep connection. I mean, she never declared about herself that she is a Zionist, and I guess Joe Biden is the last president of the United States that is declaring publicly. By the way, he just said it a week ago, I think. A week ago, saying again, and whoever is familiar with the American public opinion knows, mainly among the Democrats, he knows that to say something like that is wow. Because for so many people, unfortunately, being a Zionist, it's like being a fascist. The industry of lies is working, unfortunately, and that's why so many people think Zionism is maybe fascism. No, it's not. Zionism is humanism. Zionism is the right of Israel to exist. Zionism is a self-determination. How can you fight for the self-determination of Palestinians and in the same time deny the right of Jews for self-determination? Now, Joe Biden understands it. I'm not sure that Kamala Harris does.
I think also that Joe Biden, even though he says he's a Zionist, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they both reflect the base of the Democratic Party, and that base of the Democratic Party is not pro-Israel. And Joe Biden, he's been in politics for 50 years. Joe Biden has moved with the party on every issue. Whatever's at the forefront of the party, he'll be the loudest on that issue. And Israel has now become a not so popular issue with the party.
So what about Trump? I mean, will we see a Trump-Netanyahu reunion? Because, reports from the U.S. indicate, for example, that J.D. Vance will not be attending Netanyahu's speech either. We know that there's some bad blood between Netanyahu and Trump. I mean, what do you make of this?
It's very interesting, but I think they can overcome. I don't think that it will continue. Yes, we heard this kind of remarks against Netanyahu on behalf of Trump. It's not a problem. Yeah, okay, I mean, something which might happen. I'm not sure that Trump has good reasons, by the way. I think that that Netanyahu, what he did when he blessed Joe Biden was the right thing to do. But I do hope for all of us, and I think it will happen, they will compromise on the differences. And because generally speaking, yes, we have a problem. We have a problem also in some parts of the Republican Party, but generally speaking, they are pro-Israelis, and they will continue, I think, to be pro-Israelis, and let's hope that we see nice smiles at the end of the meeting.
And Gideon, I mean, would you agree with that the Republican Party is a lot more pro-Israel, that Trump would be a better president for Israel?
Absolutely. I want to mention two things. First of all, there's been a bad blood between Trump and many people. Rand Paul called him a cancer to the party, but once Trump became president, they made up. He called Ted Cruz the biggest liar he's ever seen, and they made up. And Nikki Haley also had severe criticism of him, and then she became his ambassador to the UN. So Trump knows how to make up with people. He moves on. So I don't think there should be any problem. I think for Israel, what's important is that if Israel wants to have a good relationship with a President Trump, the relationship it has to want is to basically say, we want to be your strategic partner. We want to help advance American interests in the Middle East. We want to project American strength. We're not asking for money. We want diplomatic support. We want you to sell us the weapons that we need. And that type of relationship will fit perfectly with a President Trump's outlook. But if Israel comes and says, listen, we need money, we need more aid, help us rebuild our southern communities, that type of request or that type of relationship will not be a healthy relationship between President Trump and Netanyahu or Israel, because President Trump doesn't like to dish out money. He'll be happy to give diplomatic support where necessary, but he wants to focus America's money on America.
All right, well, Bendel, Yamini, Gidon, Israel, thank you so much for joining us today for this important panel discussion. And speaking of politics, Palestinian factions, including longtime rivals Fatah and Hamas, have agreed to end their divisions and form a national unity government. This is according to Chinese state media following three-day negotiations hosted by Beijing. The Beijing Declaration was signed at the closing ceremony of the reconciliation talks, which marks China's growing influence in the Middle East. Last year, China brokered a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. This unity government comes as Hamas, a U.S.-designated terrorist organization, carried out the October 7th massacre, and as Israel has vowed to destroy the terrorist organization. And as the world is calling on Israel to reach a two-state solution with the Palestinians. Yet Fatah, which is supposed to be Israel's partner for peace, is now instead partnering with Hamas terrorists whose main mission is to destroy the state of Israel. So exactly who is Israel supposed to make peace with in this two-state solution scenario? And moving on, security forces went into action in Judea and Samaria with a drone strike on a terror cell and busting a kidnapping plot near Jericho. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
In Tulkarem, an airstrike targeted an armed terror cell. The strike reportedly killed 5 senior members of terror groups. According to the reports, all 5 senior commanders of terror organizations in the area were eliminated, including the commander of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade Battalion. There are ongoing exchanges of fire between IDF forces and terrorist gunmen. Earlier, the Shin Bet announced it had uncovered a terrorist plot in Judea and Samaria to kidnap Israelis. The discovery was in the Aqabat Jabber camp near Jericho. One of the terrorist suspects dug a hole near one of the homes that they intended to use to hold hostages. 2 terrorists were arrested. They had purchased firearms and other weapons and recruited others to carry out a kidnapping. The Shin Bet also said it foiled a planned shooting attack by Palestinian university students. Security officials say the cell was given instructions and funding by Hamas's branch in Turkey.
Since the Hamas attacks on October 7th, American Friends of Sheba Medical Center has stepped up in an extraordinary way. They've raised more than $35 million, ensuring the victims of the massacre and the soldiers who are fighting for Israel continue to receive life-saving treatments and rehabilitation. American Friends of Sheba has arranged for more than 150 volunteers to travel to Israel, providing critical support to the nation's largest and most comprehensive medical center. Be a part of the Sheba. Stand for health. Stand for Israel. Donate now.
And now, with news constantly bustling in Israel, staying informed can be challenging. So here is President and CEO of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, Yael Eckstein, to give us 3 highlights of this week's news stories. Let's take a look.
Shalom. Shalom from here in Israel, and here are 3 things that you should know about Israel this week. Number 1, there have been rocket attacks on northern Israel from Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon, sometimes with over 200 rockets launched at Israeli cities a day. These rockets and drones are causing mass fires across northern Israel. The way Israel is responding to this crisis is the way we respond to every crisis. We are coming together to help. All different civilians, first responders, security personnel from across northern Israel are going to where the rockets are landing and helping to put out the fires. Once again, it's the people coming together to meet this need and to save lives together. Number 2, did you know that there's now an Israeli basketball player who's playing in the NBA? Golden State Warriors have announced their 2024 Summer League roster, and it features EuroLeague player Roman Sorkin. Sorkin is an Israeli citizen who played for Maccabi Pleitika in Tel Aviv. We wish him the best as he plays in the United States in the NBA representing the Holy Land. We couldn't be more proud. And number 3, for some fellowship news. Earlier this month, on July 8th, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews had a seminar for new Olim. Olim are Jews from across the world who picked up and moved their lives to Israel. The fellowship not only helps them make that move, but we help them find a job and get settled once they are here in Israel. This is a win-win for the state of Israel and these new immigrants. All we want is to wish them a huge success in their new life and their new home in Israel, and we're standing with them to make that happen. Well, there you have it, 3 things that you now know about Israel this week. Join me next week, same place, same time, for more information and updates on the Holy Land. And especially this week, we are praying for America and wishing former President Donald Trump a refuah shlema, a quick and full healing. Amen.
And now the Paris Summer Olympics are set to begin this weekend, and the Israeli delegation is already on the way, being escorted, of course, by tight security following recent death threats aimed at Israeli athletes. More on this from ILTV's Devo Klein.
The Israeli delegation for the 2024 Summer Olympics departed Ben Gurion Airport this morning, accompanied with heightened security amidst recent threats aimed at Israeli athletes. With the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas, the Israeli delegation has faced numerous death threats. Israeli athletes are currently facing safety threats from Parisians and Europeans, but also French lawmakers and public figures are not thrilled for the Israeli team's arrival. One comment came from far-left French lawmaker Thomas Portet, who was quoted saying that Israelis are not welcome in Paris. Shortly after his speech, French Foreign Minister Stéphane Séjourné dismissed the comments and reiterated that the Israeli delegation was welcome in the French capital. Despite foreign ministry backing, the Israeli delegation is set to travel with heightened security as they prepare for a hostile reception. Israeli Olympic officials revealed that the security budget for the Paris Games had been doubled in comparison to Tokyo. Despite recent threats, the Israeli athletes are determined and departing with a national mission to represent their country, the Jewish state, and bring home as many medals as possible. The delegation, comprised of 88 athletes, will compete in 15 different categories. Along with the hope of winning, the athletes are prepared to represent Israel in the Olympic arena.
And we wish the Israeli team the best of luck. And now, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected tonight around the country, with temperatures reaching lows of about 23 degrees Celsius or 74 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, partly cloudy skies are expected alongside warm temperatures reaching highs of 34 degrees Celsius or 93 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Ladar Grave-Lazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.